In February of 2015, I was diagnosed with Chiari malformation, which essentially is when the skull is too small and forces the brain tissue into your spinal column. So in March of that year, I had to have my first brain surgery. And in February of this year, I had my second brain surgery. After that, again, everything was fine until about April. There was one night I couldn't even open my eyes. The pressure in my head was so bad. I was in the hospital for about a week, and during that time in the hospital, I had passed out and then had a seizure due to the amount of pressure in the back of my skull because of the fluid leak. And that was probably the scariest moment of my life.
There are some scriptures that I hung on to during our dark time with our son. We had a prodigal that was gone for 20 years, and he had gotten in a pretty dark place, had gone to another state for college, and wound up loving it and staying. It was a horse country, and he always loved horses, so he wound up staying and making his home and living there. Well, he got involved with some wrong people where he worked, started drinking heavily, and we didn't realize how much. We had seen him off and on, but you know, things like that can be hidden sometimes. So from alcohol, then it progressively got worse, and he got into drugs and really got in a very dark place.
So I grew up on the east side of Cleveland, a little town called Painesville. It was a violent city. We had more violent crime per capita than the actual large city of Cleveland. And I grew up in a real poor family there. We spent some winters up there where we didn't have heat in the house. Everybody stayed in the living room to keep warm at night, huddled around a kerosene heater. There was 6 people in my family. I had a couple brothers, sisters. My father suffered from some addictions, some prescription pills. So there wasn't a lot of money running around the house. My mom worked 2 jobs, left a lot of time for us kids to be alone. So I started working when I was 12 years old. Got my first full-time job, working 35 hours a week down at the local bowling alley. And my money just went to helping my family pay bills, eat. I called a friend's brother who I knew had money from various means. He was a drug dealer, and asked him if he could buy some groceries that I could pay him back on payday. So he did. He brought down 3 sacks of groceries. I carried them inside, and I got my sister something to eat, but he told me to come back out, see him in the truck after I got her something to eat. So I went back out to his truck, and we started talking, and he put some weed in my lap. Said, you know everybody through the bowling alley, try to sell some of this, and your family won't have to worry about eating ever again. So I did. Started selling drugs. That's how it started. And it evolved from there. From marijuana, I moved into buying some of my dad's prescription pills that he was getting off of him and turning around and selling them to other people. And it paid the bills, but it put me in various situations. It made it rough in school, that it seemed dismal at best. So I kept running it. Too many fights, too many bad deals. I mean, I always felt like the cops were looking at me over my shoulder. It was a bad situation. I was raised a Roman Catholic, but I felt like God wasn't in my neighborhood.
My name's Kelly Mekas, and my wife and I have been members of Storyside for about 4 years now. And 2018 has probably been the most difficult time that I can imagine in recent history. It's been a very challenging year, and the year's not over yet. I can't remember a time in my life where every aspect of my life has either been challenged or changed or attacked, whether it be my health, my marriage, my job, spiritually, emotionally. It seems like everything has been under some kind of adversity. And my wife has also been going through some similar problems with her challenges that she's had at work this year. Her mother, who's her best friend, suffered a stroke, and we've had to move her out of her home into a nursing home. So it certainly has been a very challenging time, and the year's not over yet. It's during these kind of times that you can be tempted to say, where's God? Has God caused these things to happen in my life? Is God using these things to punish me in some way, shape, or form? So these are some of the things that you can be tempted to ask during these periods of times.
All right, so starting off, like in my life, I had a fairly decent childhood. I would say a pretty good one, more blessed than others. But as life went on, there was a certain season of hurt. My parents, they had split up, and at that specific time in life, when they split up, it was pretty bad. There was a lot of hurt and a lot of tension. Me, my brother, and my sister, and my mother, we actually ended up with no place to live. We didn't have a house. We didn't really have anything. We had a minivan that we drove around in, and we would stay like at my aunt's, but we mostly would just be in the minivan, and through that we grew very close. But looking back on it now, there was a lot of hurt that I never displayed to anybody else. I masked my emotions very well. It hurt a lot, but through those times of just, not having a house and not having really, anything but my brother and my sister and my mom to lean on, I think that's when I really grew close to God, and I really gained a lot of faith in God. And especially looking back on it now and looking back at all those trials, I really realized that God was good through all of that. God put my mom in the position to get a job and go back to school and do what she had to do to provide for me and my brothers and my sister. So looking back on that, I think that I've grown even closer in my relationship with God, just due to the fact that He provided and He was there, and when I felt like I had no hope, He was the one that I could lean on. When I had all these tears to cry, He was the one that I could cry out to. So I think just with all that being said, looking back on it now, He is good and He is faithful.
What is the devil trying to accomplish? What is he doing this to me for? Why me? But then I just had to remind myself that this is all part of God's plan and not the devil's, that this is God's work, and this has only made me stronger and has really just made my faith grow. And even though it was hard to understand what God was doing at the time, I wouldn't be who I am today. I don't think I would be as hungry for God as I am today if I wouldn't have gone through what I've gone through.
At those low points, I would get very discouraged, but the problem is I would get my eyes on the situation and the circumstances where He was. And that's what we can't do. We have to trust in God's word and not look at the circumstance, because God is much greater than any circumstance or evil that's going on. It doesn't matter what it is. He's greater. And that's where our trust has to be, is to trust in His word. So I'm just grateful that he came home, and he was instantly after 7 years of fasting and prayer, he was instantly delivered from drugs, and then a year later delivered from alcohol.
When I look back at 2018 and I look at my health issues that I had, I realize that God's hand has been involved in everything that I've done. He has had my back. He's walked beside me. His arm has been around me. He has guided the surgeons and the doctors when I was having surgery on my kidneys. God has given me a hope and a future that can't be taken away regardless of what happens to me in my job or in other areas of my life. That hope and that future, that is solid. It can't be taken away. Through this whole process, my trust in God has deepened. My faith has gotten stronger. And I firmly believe that God is using these circumstances that I've gone through to prepare me for something bigger and greater.
And in the meantime, while this was going on, I had switched where I was located at my stores a few times, and I had met another fellow co-worker, and his name was Ralph, an older gentleman, old Army sergeant, but real passionate about his faith in God. And at the time, I was single again, and I was wilding out, pursuing women, having fun, doing whatever I could do just to get my mind off of what was going on. And Ralph always was on me about, that's not the way, Matt, that's not the way. God's calling me to come for you. So I was like, Ralph, I don't got time for that. He ain't had time for me, I don't got time for him. So, we talked a little bit about it, and he didn't push too hard, but hard enough that he was in my ear about it. So, so then I switched locations again, and me and Ralph went our separate ways. Well, for various reasons and circumstances, Ralph ended up switching locations too. He came right to the same spot that I was, and Ralph was back in my ear at it again. We were actually partners now, working third shift. And I remember one day he comes up to me and asks me, he says, Matt, do you even have a Bible? I said, no, never had one, never needed one. He said, come with me. He walks me up to the aisle in the store, and he said, pick one. And I didn't know anything about him. I just picked up a Bible. I said, what about it? He says, come on. We walk up to the registers, and he bought me a Bible. And he says, Matt, I don't care what you use it for. He says, you can use it for a coaster, use it to level your coffee table. He says, but you're going to have a Bible in your house. Read it if you want, don't read it, but you're going to have one. And so he bought me the Bible, and I took it home that day. And I don't want to say I read it right away. It sat around for a while, I think. But he still always just preached to me a little bit about God and stuff. And eventually I started reading it, page at a time, nothing big, little snippets of stories. And I started at the beginning, the very first Genesis, and I'd go to work after reading a couple pages of it or whatever and ask Ralph questions. And I started looking like a rock star again. I was like, man, whose side is this on? And to this day, I see my kids as much as I want. We've improved the relationship with their mother. We're friends. We come to all the sporting events together. The baptism at the church, I had all of my kids there, plus 2 of my nieces and nephews. So we're all one big Brady Bunch family, and it's all been worked out. My faith continues to grow every day. I could look back from when I was growing up and selling drugs and thinking about different situations I was placed in, about how God did direct my steps, how a deal fell through with a specific dealer that I thought was going to change my life at the time, but really that dealer ended up going to jail a year later. It could have been me. How different situations where we got shot at, I was never hit. It was those in hindsight moments to where I could look back and see that God was with me. How Ralph chased me from store to store, not him chasing me, just how the series of events unfolded, but God kept him with me to keep directing me back towards him. And that's how I know that God's in my life, that He's been with me every step of the way.